So far we've looked at three teams. We've looked at Chennai Super Kings, Mumbai Indians, and Royal Challengers Bangalore. The fourth team that I want to look at is Sunrisers Hyderabad. Managed by the Marans, I've always considered Sunrisers Hyderabad to be one of the better managed franchises. That is till last year, where they got into this rather bizarre face-off with their talismanic batsman and leader, David Warner. Now, David Warner is somebody I greatly respect. I've always had this feeling, unsubstantiated, of course, that most of the Australian players essentially dial it in for IPL. They play a different game in BBL, or they play differently for Ashes. When they come to India, I think many of them, Stephen Smith being one of them, who have this kind of, this is a quick cash grab. Let's just get the money, get out. None of this means anything. Maxwell is also somebody who I feel sometimes, maybe not sometimes, but sometimes he's not quite there. Now, this is one guy, David Warner, who's brought to IPL the kind of intensity that he brings to Australia. It's a genuine intensity. And I think one of the things that Sunrisers did was they made him a captain. And remember that based on his ball tampering, his allegations, his being banned for a year, it was fairly obvious that David Warner was never going to become a captain for Australia. But Sunrisers Hyderabad made him the captain, and I think he really appreciated that. He's played for Sunrisers Hyderabad. I mean, he was initially for the Delhi Daredevils. He's an okay performer there. He went to Sunrisers Hyderabad and he single-handedly won the tournament for them, like single-handedly. And he's done so much for the franchise, almost at the same level that Dhoni has done for Chennai Super Kings. But look at the way the Chennai Super Kings has treated Dhoni. And unfortunately, look at the way Sunrisers Hyderabad treated David Warner. I mean, David Warner was having a poor season. And I don't know what was going on behind the scenes. But whatever was going on behind the scenes did not require this. When you have a performer, a superstar athlete who has given so much to your franchise, then I think it's incumbent upon you. And the reason it's not just a moral thing, it's the fact that if you want your franchise to persist, well, you need to attract the best talent. And I think after what they did to David Warner, I think many cricketers might have this concern about Sunrisers Hyderabad. I mean, I as a fan and somebody who's really respected Sunrisers Hyderabad felt very let down by the way they treated David Warner. And it was very obvious they were not going to retain him or ever going to select him. I think that the bridge has been permanently destroyed and nuked. And that's fine. I mean, I think David Warner got a good, you got a good franchise. Obviously, Sunrisers Hyderabad did not want to work with him either. So they retained, and they had a terrible season last year. I mean, this happens when there is disunity within the ranks. I mean, there were times when I felt that nobody knew what the 11 was going to be, what it was going to be when they turned up. And it was a dumpster fire. And again, as a KKR fan, I'm used to seeing dumpster fires in my own franchise. It was very, very strange to see it in Sunrisers Hyderabad, which is, again, as I've said, I always consider it to be a fairly decently well-managed franchise. So they retained Kane Williamson, they retained Abdul Samad, and they retained Umran Malik. Again, this strange retention decisions. I don't think Abdul Samad kind of, set the field alight. I don't know why they retained him. Again, he was an uncapped player, so it was not a huge financial consequence of retaining him. But still, I'm pretty sure they could have bought him cheaper at the auction. And Umran Malik was retained based on a few overs of good pace. Again, very little effect. Very little impact. I honestly don't understand why he was retained. Again, I understand that retention is not, it's a joint decision between the players and the franchise. So just because somebody like, for instance, KKR didn't retain Shubman Gill, it doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't want to retain Shubman Gill. Maybe Shubman Gill didn't want to get retained by KKR at the price that they were at the level that they were offering him, which is perfectly fine. Again, after all, this is a business transaction. And these are franchises, so of course. But their retention, they retained Kane Williamson, and which was okay. And then they retained Abdul Samad and Umran Malik. It was instructive they did not retain, let's say, Johnny Bairstow. which I felt they should have. But again, it could be that Johnny Bairstow didn't want to play with for Sunrisers. We have no idea. Could have been, whatever, it could have been a financial decision, whatever it was. But this is what they had. So they went in, and this is how their team kind of looks like. You have Rahul Tripathi. They bought Rahul Tripathi from Kolkata Knight Riders. It was sad for a Kolkata Knight Riders fan like me to lose Rahul Tripathi. But I also think that it's good for Rahul Tripathi. I think he got a lot of money, and he's definitely going to be more of a fulcrum of the Sunrisers Hyderabad team than he would have been in Kolkata Knight Riders, which kind of can cover up for him. But I think he's going to be vital to Sunrisers Hyderabad, his form, his batting. And Rahul Tripathi has been, I would say, again, he has his limitations, and we'll possibly come to that. But he's played well. He's a person who gives 100% for the side. You can see that. And I don't think anybody could want more from somebody. So he's definitely going to be their opener. And I think he's going to be a good opener. Whether he's going to be a match winner, whether he's going to win them the trophy in the way that David Warner did, I have my doubts. Rahul Tripathi has his level. And he's good support cast, but I just don't think that he's ever going to be the spearhead of your batting. But when you go in at number one, you usually are the spearhead. Then who's going to partner him as an opener? So it seems to be it would be Markram. This is again a choice that I personally cannot get behind. I don't think he's that good. He's an okay batsman, but coupled with Rahul Tripathi, for me, an opening is the most important in many ways in T20. And it has to be a very, very aggressive batsman paired with somebody who's less aggressive, who's willing to play the long game. Now, Rahul Tripathi can't play the long game. So can Markram play the long game? Not sure either. I don't think he's a very aggressive batsman also. I don't think he was particularly good form recently. I don't think he had a particularly great season with Kings with Punjab. So I'm not too sure. Again, I'm getting into the negatives, and there's going to be a lot of them for Sunrisers. But even the opening doesn't give me a lot of confidence. Then one down, it will possibly be Nicholas Pooran. Again, very good, very aggressive batsman. But again, not somebody who can kind of anchor the team. He's kind of inconsistent. He can win you a match, but he'll win you perhaps 1 or 2 matches and you'll score 0 in the other games. So a very high risk player. Now you have Kane Williamson. So maybe Kane Williamson will come in 1 drop and then Pooran after that, whatever it is. 3-4, fairly decent. But here's the start of the problem. You've already have 3 of your overseas players in the top 4. This was essentially the same problem that Sunrisers Hyderabad had before. Excessively dependent on their foreign players, and this happened after Shikhar Dhawan left their side, which is when they started losing the balance of their side. And I think this is an even more unbalanced side than they had previously. Then you have Abdul Samad, who's obviously going to play given that you chose to retain him. Then you have Abhishek Sharma. Then you have Washington Sundar. And then you have the bowlers. So you have a choice. You have just 1 overseas slot left. So it'll either be a choice between Marco Jansen, and Sean Abbott. Both of them fairly decent choices. And then you have your bowlers, Natarajan, Bhuvaneshwar, and Umran Malik or Kartik Tyagi. Now, what are the positives of this attack? One thing I forgot to say, they could have also retained Rashid Khan. Why did I not think of that? Why did I forget that? But Rashid Khan, they also didn't retain. Again, as I said, could be that Rashid Khan didn't want to be retained. So whatever it is, I think they lost it at the retention also. So coming back to the positives, I think on paper, this is a fairly decent pace attack, I would say. There's Bhuvaneshwar Kumar, there is Natarajan, there is either Jensen or Abbott. I don't think they have the luxury of playing them both. And then they have Umran Malik and Kartik Tyagi. They possibly can play them both. But that's about it. The rest of it, all negatives. So one of the biggest systemic problem that this team has, it lacks that icon Indian player. That one at least icon Indian player that every team needs. There's none here. And think of it, Mumbai Indians is 4 of them. There is Rohit Sharma, Ishan Kishan, Surya Kumar Yadav, and Bumrah. They have 4 icon Indian players. And Sunrisers Hyderabad doesn't even have one. So that's a huge problem. I think they're going to struggle massively because of that. I'm not too sure about their spin bowling also. So Sundar, Washington Sundar is a bowling all-rounder, but he can keep runs down, but he's not going to be that Rashid Khan kind of person. And you're missing that, the match-winning spinner, because that's been a part of Sunrisers Hyderabad's brand. They've always been a good bowling unit. Whenever they've wanted, essentially their main secret was very solid bowling unit with a lot of variety, backed by the batting of David Warner. They don't have David Warner, and they don't have that good as, the spin side is fairly weak. Seam side is okay, I would say. Even if we look at, then there's Aiden Markaram, and the opening I think is also weak. Even if we look at the seam bowling attack, Bhuvaneshwar Kumar's best days are behind. I think he's really, really dropped his pace. There were times when he was bowling at 112, 114, 115. And I just feel that, again, he's going to get worse. He's at the trailing age of a great career, I would say. He's also been, extremely effective for Sunrisers Hyderabad. I'm at least glad that they bought him back. I didn't think they should have retained him, but I'm glad they bought him back. But I honestly feel that Bhuvi is not going to be able to carry their side in the way that he has done before. Umran Malik, again, he's basically an unproven quantity. I mean, he just bowled some overs of searing pace. But the problem of that level of pace, there are 2 problems. Is that on the certain kind of track, that is meat and drink to today's batsmen. That level of pace. It's really the variation of pace that gets people out more than a one. If you peg it at one speed, even if it's a very high speed, batsmen can do that. Can now have the training to tonk really high speed bowling out of that ground. If it's consistent, if there's the lack of variety. I mean, somebody like Loki Ferguson, the main thing is that he has a lot of variety, even though he's really fast. So that's why Loki Ferguson is in a class above. And as a KKR fan, I'm just heartbroken that we lost Loki Ferguson. But coming back to Sunrisers Hyderabad, Umran Malik at his pace, he could be a handful, but he carries with it injury worries. That level of bowling, there's always the risk of injury. Coming back to Natarajan, again, solid bowler, great Yorker bowler, has also won games for Sunrisers, but he's kind of gone off the boil. I mean, injury. I mean, cricket, especially if you are a fast bowler, it's a question of rhythm. It's a question, you don't have a lot of seasons, honestly. Very few people have that longevity, especially in today where they play so much. If you get an injury, or if you kind of lose your rhythm, it becomes very difficult. I'm not saying people don't, but it becomes very difficult to come back. And again, Natarajan is coming back. Bhuvi, best days are numbered. So even though on paper, this looks a fairly decent bowling attack, even that isn't solid. And the final thing that I have is this, I have a concern about the firepower that this team has. The sheer guns, the artillery that this team has. I mean, who is going to fire? Rahul Tripathi, I mean, the Kolkata Knight Riders, he's fired from time to time, but he's not a consistent fire. And again, if the bowling is really good, Rahul Tripathi is outclassed. He just can't make it at that level. He's a good player, but he's not a great player. And nobody will expect him to, let's say, play for the Indian 11 in any time soon. So that's the thing about Rahul Tripathi. Who else? I mean, Kane Williamson, of course, is a great batsman, but he's not the firepower kind of guy. Who's going to finish games for them? Abdul Samad, Abhishek Sharma, Washington Sundar. There's this weakness. Now you're saying, if you're a fan, you're saying, what about Nicholas Puran? That's it. This is just one batsman with genuine firepower. And that too, he's not very consistent. So you're basically down to Nick Pooran. And, that's the problem with Sunrisers Hyderabad. They just way too many places in the side with no cell phone reception. It's too many dropped calls. And that's why I think Sunrisers Hyderabad are one of the weakest teams post-auction. Now, again, when one says this, IPL begins, they get into rhythm. Maybe somebody like, Pooran has the time of his life and they win. The thing about IPL and T20 is you don't need everybody to fire. 2 or 3 people firing at peak can get your team through. I mean, look at Kolkata Knight Riders making it to the final after they were at the bottom. Just 2 or 3 players who played out of their skin. There was a large section of the team that did absolutely nothing, including Dinesh Karthik and Owen Morgan. So you don't require everybody to be performing at peak. Many people perhaps can't perform at the peak, but if 2 or 3 people are just playing out of their skins, you can go far. So maybe Hyderabad will have that luck. But right now, looking at what they have, I just don't have a good feeling. So with the points, I'm going to go with a low valuation. It's going to be 4 out of 10. I know that fans of Sunrisers might not like me saying this. As a fan of KKR, I don't think I have a right to grade anybody, but I'm going ahead anyways. So it's 4 out of 10 for Sunrisers Hyderabad. Again, a team I've admired in the past, but I just don't. Looking at this team, it just doesn't give me a great feeling here. I think there are just too many blank spots, as I said, cell reception drops here that cannot be covered, I believe. 4 out of 10, again, I'm not going to give them that 1 point because, again, it's a new side. This side hasn't really played before, I believe. So there's a lot of new personnel. So that old camaraderie that everybody knows their roles, even that's not there. And it's good for Sunrisers Hyderabad. I think last season, there was definitely a lot of friction within the team, but obvious there was. And again, it's not unheard of. It's just that I think there's friction in all teams. There's a friction everywhere, even in family. But a good, well-managed team, it's able to manage that without people getting to know about it. And last time it was very obvious with David Warner and the kind of social media messages he made, that things were not right between them and their captain and their best player and somebody who's been such a big part of their brand. So again, the brand has changed. It's a fairly new look, I would say. Again, there is Kane Williamson. He's kind of the link between the past and the present, but that's about it. There's Bhuvaneshwar Kumar too. But again, I'm not going to give it that +1 point for having played together. So 4 out of 10, which puts it among the first few teams at the lowest. I wish they had done better. So now let's see how what they do when the rubber truly hits the road. Bye.